Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steve Van Einstein. Thank y'all for joining me again as we do the next chapter reading from the book I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. The first two chapters have been just absolutely fantastic. I hope y'all enjoy this third one as much as I do. And I will be reading from the original printing that I have from 1934. Well, first edition. I think it's third printing technically, but either way. There is also a facsimile reprint that you can get. It's called Believing in False Gods. I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. It's literally just pictures of the pages. That's what a facsimile reprint is. I don't know if I say that right, actually. So, we will be reading the third chapter from this book, which is titled The Business of Meaning Well and Doing Badly. So, here we go. This is Chapter 3 of I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen, titled The Business of Meaning Well and Doing Badly. Chapter 3. This Business of Meaning Well and Doing Badly. Morals. There comes a time to almost every man when he seems to die inside, and that time came to me. I think, when I found that my best guess about life served neither me nor the other fellow any better than my first guess. I want to tell you that things looked pretty black to me right then. There seemed nothing much to do but go back to my dreary round of escapes from the home into the office and from the office to the speakeasy. I intended, of course, to go right on living. I would eat breakfast every morning as usual, suffering, also as usual, from my regular hangover. I would go to the office as usual, play bridge when sober enough in the evenings or interested enough, and let off steam between times out on a party with the boys. I might even try an occasional but unenthusiastic fling at revising my book, though I felt that anything I wrote now would just be a lot of claptrap, just a juggling of words, a building of illusions which had no place in the drab reality of life. Then, through reading Herbert F. Standing's book, Spirit in Evolution, a wholly new idea occurred to me. I had figured out three plans: the egotistic, the humanistic, and the theistic. We covered those in the last chapter. I thought I had that in deciding on the third of these. In deciding to do good and devote a larger portion of my life to service, I actually was following that plan and serving God. Standing's book, however, suggested that to be spiritual, one had to be far more than just well-meaning and intelligent. I had always thought that serving God meant doing the best I knew and using the talents God gave me. And that was what I called being creative in life. My talents, I believed, were analytical, philosophical, and literary. As I read through Standing's book, however, it occurred to me that soul qualities are not, after all, mental qualities. They are moral qualities. Unlike the materially big man and spiritually big man, it is not dependent on worldly influence, dominance, and social prestige, nor is he necessarily an intellectual giant with the doctor's degrees and fellowships of learned societies. His life is founded on the simple moral qualities of honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. He does not grow more honest nor more pure through increasing knowledge of what is honest and pure. He does not get that way through his intellect at all, nor through his physical prowess and achievements. All the material possessions I had ever acquired, for example, and all the intellectual knowledge I had ever gathered had not added a single cubit to my stature morally. In fact, if anything, I had grown through the years more dishonest, more impure, more selfish, and more unloving than ever. The more I thought about it, therefore, the more I began to suspect that, before I could do anything to help other people, something would have to be done about it inside of me. But what? I recalled the words of my publisher, right that second part, called Life and How. And I recalled the words of my partner, how do you grow a soul? Well, how? It was here that Standing's book helped me again. We grow physically, as he suggested, by response to a physical environment. And as the body adapts itself to use or survive its surroundings, it grows not only in size, but evolves or changes in general character and quality. The mind, I could see, would grow and evolve, not in response to its physical surroundings, but in response to an altogether different kind of environment. The environment of ideas in which it would find a sort of intellectual food, air, and exercise. And since this physical environment and intellectual or psychological environment seemed to have no effect whatever on the growth of morality, I would have to get in touch with some kind of moral environment, some set of conditions, some atmosphere of goodness, or some moral force which would feed, stimulate, and exercise the honesty, purity, love, and unselfishness in man. Side note, those are the 4 absolutes in the Oxford group. Honesty, purity, love, and unselfishness. These qualities, as well as I knew, do not grow through self-indulgence. They do not grow through thinking. I could neither learn them nor teach them. But somehow, if they grew in me and became a part of me, I might pass them along to others by example, or a sort of contagion, as one gives the measles. They would not grow, as I now realized, however, unless I could lay hold of some kind of spiritual environment or moral form of food, air, and exercise. And I did not know where to turn. And while I was all too familiar with my physical environment or world of comforts, and was becoming more and more familiar with my psychological environment or world of ideas, I had never in all my life encountered any spiritual environment or world of goodness. If such a thing existed, it had never come within my ken. I had never sensed it in any way. I knew, of course, that in nature there may be the sudden emergence of something altogether new, novel, and unique. Some species of plant or animal, let us say, which is not a hybrid of past forms, which does not grow, but just emerges. As Professor Lovejoy explains, it just pops into existence. He then goes on to say he has abundant reason to believe that there have occurred genuine new births in time. A sheer increase, diversification, and enrichment of the sum of things already there. This emergence or new birth has unquestionably taken place, not only in physical form, but in the realm of man's own consciousness. I, in my own career, seemed to have passed through 2 stages. First, I was conscious only of self and self-desire, reaching out instinctively to whatever I wanted in my physical environment, not caring what that did to other people and the world. Then I began to think of what I ought to do for myself and others, progressing from a sense of instinct to a sense of duty. I had reached in my book the intellectual or socially conscious stage. I then found myself reaching for a still higher stage of consciousness. And since the emergent evolutionist Alexander says that deity is the next quality to the highest we know. I believed that the thing I was reaching for might be no less than a consciousness of God. But how do I achieve this consciousness and form contact with the force that might be helping me grow a soul? Becoming aware of a spiritual environment, if any such thing existed, and getting in touch with God as a means of growing a soul, should, I felt, fall within the province of the church. And altogether, I had never gained anything from the church, but for a brief glow of self-approval when I was baptized. I thought I might find something in religious literature. Here and there, as in the writings of G.A. Studdard Kennedy, I did run across passages which made me feel that the writer was in touch with some moral creating force, inspiration, or environment I did not know. But nowhere did I find any understandable suggestion which told me how I, too, might get in touch with that same force and experience that things which those occasionally inspired writers described. Sorry, let me read that last sentence. But nowhere did I find any understandable suggestion which told me how I, too, might get in touch with this same force and experience the things which those occasionally inspired writers described. Okay. I could, of course, understand, as Edward S. Wood suggested, that a man might be no more able to create his own spiritual or moral life than he is able to bring himself into the world at will. I could see, as Drummond wrote, that just as something outside of the thermometer which produces a change in the thermometer, so it must be something outside the soul of man which produces a moral change upon him. In other words, I began to see where the humanists might be wrong. Professor Irving Babbitt, for example, he said that man is vile by nature and must make himself behave. But my excursion into religious literature, not to mention my experience with broken New Year's resolutions, begin to show me that self-management as a corrective of behavior was entirely inadequate. That's my experience. There must indeed be some other environment or force, and I must find it if I wanted to gain any real and lasting satisfaction for myself in life, or to do anything creative in the world. Still, however, these books did not say just what I was to do to form contact with that power, and, much as I disliked and mistrusted them as a class, I decided at last to have it out in person with some intelligent minister. I selected one I believed to be spiritual by nature, and who was, I felt, entirely sincere. What, I asked this preacher, do you think we are living for? To my pleased surprise, he said he believed that we are living to grow a soul. There seemed to be real promise here, but when I put the question my professor, my partner, my pal, and my publisher had thrown back at me. When I asked, how do you grow a soul, he, too, threw back the question, well, he said, how do you? If you could write a book on how to grow a soul, it would be snapped up by every minister I know. I had therefore to add another P, the pastor, to the publisher, professor, partner, and pal. 5 P's again. Who had failed to help me. And I felt as though I had run against still another blockade of 5 P's. There we go. With my groping unanswered, I felt at this time that the church, with all its protests of modern knowledge and method, had not really risen from its ashes in the dark ages. The answer it held, if answer be there, might lie buried somewhere in the foundation of the church, but it certainly did not appear in the 20th century superstructure. It's interesting. I decided, therefore, to go back in history and back not simply to the beginnings of Christian church, but back to the beginnings of morality. I wanted to see if, throughout the ages, I could find any moralist, religious or otherwise, who had known, used, and could convey to me any secret of applying his philosophy in the actual business of living. A professor of philosophy from England once told me that for years he lectured upon morals to people, all of whom were morally going to pieces under his very nose. His were moral words which induced no moral action. He was lecturing to people who, however well they might mean, were still doing badly. That fitted my own case exactly, and, in fact, it seemed to characterize my entire age. Still true. Where, then, could I find a religion or a philosophy that worked, and what was the secret of its working? Beginning with one Ptahhotep, an Egyptian moralist who lived some 5,000 years before Christ and whose precepts appear in what is known as the oldest book in the world, I found a knowledge of right and wrong and a set of rules for moral conduct practically as complete as any that we know today. But I found no record that any of the ancient Egyptians, including Ptahhotep himself, were practicing these precepts. His words, as far as I could judge, had no more effect on his hearers as those of the lecturer on morals mentioned above, and no more consequences in the course of world events than my own unpublished articles. More writing, no results. People in those days, as now, were meaning well and doing badly. Throughout the history of all the moralists, in fact, I found a singular lack of moral application. J.N. Larned seemed to sum up the whole story when he said, "The knowledge of good and evil has been complete in the world from the beginnings of history, and mankind has had nothing to learn since but the application of it." I'm going to read that again. That's a pretty awesome line. I don't know who J.N. Larned is, but this is an awesome line. "The knowledge of good and evil has been complete in the world from the beginnings of history, and mankind has had nothing to learn since but the application of it." Here and there in history, of course, I could trace a partial application of morality. This was true, for instance, in the case of Abraham, Moses, Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Among them all, however, as I was now obliged to admit, there was one, Jesus of Nazareth, who had lived out his philosophy perfectly and completely. He alone meant well, and he did well in all departments of living. He alone sowed moral seed, which had a universal rather than a limited spread. He alone was able to impart his disciples the secret of application, and the same power he himself possessed. But still, I could not quite make out just what the secret or this power was. Was it the God consciousness or contact with spiritual environment that I had now begun to grope for? Or was it simply a tremendous personality coupled with an applied psychology beyond any known today? In either case, how did Jesus develop this personality or psychology? And how did he give his disciples the same command of power? Tracing back the moralists, in short, I found a few particular appliers and one perfect and complete applier. Yet nowhere could I seem to find just how this application was performed. If the Christian church anywhere had preserved Christ's secret of forming moral qualities of the soul, they had by now pretty well concealed it, so far as I was concerned. I was not, however, ready to admit that the state of consciousness I sought did not exist just because nobody had shown me how to find it. Christ himself had stated that it was not an easy way to find, and I began to cast about for other means of seeking. And then that's it for this chapter. The next chapter, chapter 4, is called The Business of Making Character. Oh, I kind of want to skip to that one. This book is so good. I love this book. So that was a building on last week's where he realized growing a soul is a great goal, but how do you actually do it? And he's discovered morals. So we'll go into it more next weekend. I'll give you my review of this chapter. And then after that, we'll go into chapter 4, Making Character. So, the business of making character. So, I am excited about it. Thank you all for joining me again tonight. And until next time, thanks.